Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Hello and welcome, everyone. It's Friday night, and you're listening to Paranormal Review Radio with your hosts, Anthony Agati in New York.
And me, Luci Liebfried from Chicago. We're so happy you could join us tonight. There's going to be a lot of discussion, and we want your feedback. Our chat room is up and running, so feel free to further discuss the topic or ask a question. Now, if you lose sound on your player, just refresh your page or log back in. Blog Talk can be a little bit wacky sometimes, and you can also send us an email at paranormalreviewradio@yahoo.com. And be sure to check us out on our Facebook show page. Anthony, what are we going to talk about tonight?
Well, Lucy, we've been recently discussing a lot of topics concerning how people can astral project as well as remote viewing and out-of-body experiences. And the reactions and chatter about these shows has actually overwhelmed us. It's really stirred up some really great discussions on and off the air. So we thought we could go one step further on this topic and talk to someone from an organization that enhances and supports this development. Back in October, I actually saw a show on the Bio channel, and I'm pretty sure you guys did too, who are listening out there, called The Unexplained. And the show highlighted the Monroe Institute in Faber, Virginia. I was completely taken aback by the stories and the history of the Monroe Institute that I said to myself, we have got to get someone on from there. And what better person than the executive director and president of the Monroe Institute, Carol Sabic del Herran. Carol, originally from the United States, lived in Spain for many years, and for the last 22 has been associated with the Monroe Institute. As a residential trainer and international outreach trainer, she held weekend and week-long programs in Spain and other locations around the world as her full-time work since 1995. She has been a professional member and on the board of advisors of the Monroe Institute for many years. Carol holds degrees in psychology, law, an MBA in international marketing, and a doctorate of energy medicine. In 2009, Carol moved back to America to reinstate the outreach program, training new facilitators to teach weekend programs in their local areas. She later accepted the position of director of programs and was elected vice president by the board of directors. In December 2011, she was appointed to the position that she currently holds as executive director and president. In this role, she wants to make a bigger contribution to the world in the study and experience of different levels of consciousness, but also in very practical ways, helping people lead better, more satisfying lives. Her plans include putting in place the administrative structures that provide a solid base for the Institute, expand research of the new SAM technology, and organizing systems to spread and develop TMI programs throughout the worldwide community. The mission of the Monroe Institute is to enhance worldwide cooperative efforts in furthering the exploration of consciousness, expanded awareness, and discovery of self. Let's expand our awareness and discover ourselves a little more tonight. Help me in welcoming Miss Carol Sabic de Herran. Hi, Carol. How are you tonight?
I'm just fine. Nice to be here.
Great. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Pretty well. I usually now just go by Carol de la Herran.
Okay, great.
But you did great.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure I pronounced your name correctly.
Hi, Carol. It is a pleasure to speak with you tonight.
Well, it's really nice to be with you all because you're talking about my favorite topics.
Yes.
Well, you know what? Since Anthony gave everybody your background while at the Monroe Institute, I want to know how did you become interested in this field? I mean, what motivated you to become part of the Monroe Institute?
Well, I first found out about it in '88. I was at the JFK airport, 3 kids and a 10-hour delay, and so we walked around bookstores, and this book jumped off the shelf that was called Mega Brain, and talked about how to increase brain potential. And, with 3 kids, I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. I'll buy it. And in the book, it talks first about the Monroe Institute doing research in accelerated learning. Interesting. But then the next chapter, it started talking about out-of-body experiences, and I had never even heard of it, but I thought, wow, that is the coolest thing. I want to go there. And finally, in '90, I was able to do that because I couldn't find the place to begin with. It was back before Internet. And I did my first program there in '90 and was so impressed by the results it had in me. And I was not what you call their best participant because I slept through most of the exercises. But I did have one extremely profound experience, and then went home, and people started saying to me, "You're different. What did you do?" And I said, "No, I'm not different. I'm just the same." And they said, "No, you're not. You're different." And my kids said, "Yeah, you're different. You're much nicer now." And so that motivated me to go back many times and just continue my own work, then eventually start trying to see if others might be interested.
Well, Robert Monroe wrote many books on out-of-body experiences, and he said that the greatest illusion is that mankind has limitation. Now, Mr. Monroe is said to have developed his out-of-body experience skills spontaneously. Now, is this something he felt that we as human beings could do, or do most of us have to learn how to do this thing?
Well, some people seem to be born with an innate ability, and many children talk about flying and things, and then as they get to about age 7, a lot of it kind of goes away, like other different kinds of psychic skills. But Monroe actually had started researching accelerated learning during the light sleep state, and he was a radio engineer. He actually was the vice president of NBC Radio for some years. And so sound is what he knew. And so to facilitate people getting into that sleep state so he could practice with the accelerated learning, he thought about using sound. And using sound on himself, he tried to experiment, and he was his own guinea pig. And doing that is when he started having these vibrations in his body, and then suddenly one night thought he fell out of bed, but actually realized that he was floating next to the chandelier on his ceiling. And he looked down and he said, "But who is that man in bed with my wife?" And suddenly realized that it was himself and went into total panic that he had died. But as he puts it, he started swimming through the air and finally got back into his body and sat up and said, "Well, I'm not dead, so I must have a very serious brain tumor or I must be totally crazy." And that's how his adventure started. So he, right from the beginning, associated his experiences with the use of sound technologies.
Okay. Well, that's basically my next question, because, that you mentioned that Robert, was a pioneer in radio and actually television and movies. He did compose music and he was a producer. So this all seems really logical, that music itself and the effects of sound has on human beings would intrigue him. So he created the hemisync and founded the Monroe Institute. So hemisync is short for hemispheric synchronicity. So for someone like me, in your words, what exactly is hemisync?
Okay, hemisync is based on a sound technology that's called binaural beats. and basically that means two slightly different tones, one in each ear. And on stereo headphones that works very well. It's a technique that was not discovered by Monroe, but was discovered in the 19th century by a man named William Dove, and it was used for testing hearing. But when Monroe was trying to help people move into these deep meditative states of consciousness, he found that binaural beats could help this, because putting two slightly different tones in each ear, the brain is trying to regain equilibrium, and since you're hearing the sounds in headphones, you can't really do that, and so the brain starts creating brain waves exactly equivalent to the difference between the two sounds. So if one sound is, say, 100 cycles per second and the other is 104, the brain actually starts creating brain waves at 4 cycles per second. And so that way you can facilitate the brain moving into these specific brainwave states. And hemisync is actually layers of up to 35 layers of sounds, some that may facilitate you moving into deeply relaxed states, and others that facilitate you staying conscious enough so that you remember your experiences, because when you get into deep sleep states, you really don't remember anything. And then the part about the hemispheric synchronization, that's kind of like an added benefit that he wasn't really expecting, but what he realized is that using the sounds in this way, it actually synchronizes the brainwave patterns on both sides of our brain. The left brain that's more the rational, analytical side, with the right brain that is the more intuitive, flowing kind of side of the brain. And when those two parts of the brain are functioning simultaneously, that's considered an optimal state of brain functioning. And so this hemispheric synchronization was like an added side effect of moving people into these states, but using the headphones and using the system called binaural beats.
That's amazing. You know what? Your life work is truly amazing. So I want to know, besides the Lifeline program at the Monroe Institute that we saw on the Bio Channel, which we're going to get into in a little bit, what are some of the other programs that you provide to people who are looking to explore their consciousness and transform their lives?
Well, we have a basic program called the Gateway Voyage, and in this program, this is kind of our entry-level program for most other programs, and you explore 5 different states of consciousness, starting with one called, Monroe, he didn't like esoteric kind of terms, so he didn't give names to these levels of consciousness, he gave them numbers. And so Focus 10, as he calls it, is a state of mind awake but body completely asleep, which means that you have a lot of delta brain waves keeping your body totally asleep, but also accompanied by higher level brain waves so that you can be conscious. But then in a second state, it's what he calls expanded awareness, where you have access to all that intuition and knowing that we all have but often can't get in touch with. And then we move into a state of no time, where you can move back and forth in time and can do a lot of incredible manifesting, and a state beyond, he describes it as beyond time and beyond space, Focus 21. So it's a whole process in this first program, which kind of lays the footing to then move into specific programs that are for different kinds of activities. You mentioned some at the beginning, like the remote viewing, and there's other ones to open your heart energy, and there's others to work with guidance. There's quite a number of different programs, and then there is one specifically for out-of-body experiences. Also, we have a lot of different programs, and we're expanding them all the time because there's so many different possibilities that you can do with this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Carol, you were just mentioning the levels in Focus 21, and I believe going beyond Focus 21, you're getting into, I believe, what is called the Lifeline program, which is what drew my interest to the Monroe Institute. And I really wanted to get into a discussion and a conversation about this program because what the participants recalled and the stories that came back from what I had watched on the episode just really blew my mind. I had gotten chills, actually, after watching that episode. So can you start off by explaining what the Lifeline program is about and what is the basic idea of it?
The Lifeline program kind of started when Monroe's wife became very ill, and he started really looking into dying and what we can expect afterwards. And he found that he had one experience where he himself was directed by guidance to help rescue a soul that had died in a shipwreck, but because it was such a traumatic death, didn't realize that he was actually dead and thought he was swimming in the water in the North Atlantic. And this whole experience really affected him a lot, and so he started creating this program to see if we really could help people who, after death, didn't really move on to what Monroe calls the park or Focus 27 or like a way station where you sort of reside until you decide where to go from there. And so in the Lifeline program, the whole idea is to learn how to move into these higher states of consciousness that we would consider beyond death and be able to navigate in them, communicate with those who are there, and help those who might need some help. A lot of times the help is just helping them realize that they're dead. Other times it's kind of showing them a bit of loving kindness or something to help them move along, because it seems that the vibration of our energy is easier for them to recognize than their own spirit guides that might be right there waiting for them, because they're still so focused on earth kind of energy and earth life that they don't even realize that they have angels or other beings there waiting to help them. And so we kind of provide that interface also.
So how does, when someone comes to the Monroe Institute and they sign up for the Lifeline program, what, are there techniques? Is there a method of, I guess, encouraging and enhancing the participant to be able to get to that level? Is there a hemisync involved? Is there lights?
There's hemisync involved in all of our programs. And to do the Lifeline program, first you have to do the gateway, the one that I was explaining before, to get you kind of prepared to move into these higher levels of consciousness. And then in the Lifeline program, with the hemisync, and in the case of the Lifeline program, it's actually the sounds are prepared to take us into a state of deep relaxation, but also into very high gamma brain waves that facilitate these mystical kinds of experiences and make it possible to have this kind of communication.
Now, I'm sure people who may not be familiar with the process of Lifeline or even out-of-body experiences, that it may seem overwhelming to them, that, they'd possibly think that, only deep conscious thinkers or experimenters can only do this. What do you say to people that think this is something that is sort of above what they are capable of experiencing?
Well, what we say to everyone, there comes a time when you're really interested in these things, you read every book you can find, but there comes a time when you want to experience it yourself. And the sound helps us all do that because these are natural abilities that we all have. And as Monroe put it, we're really just remembering what we already know. And as far as Lifeline goes, he said that every single night, most of us that were even remotely interested in this kind of stuff were actually doing it, but just at an unconscious level, that we were out moving, that we go out of body every night, and that we have communication, and that many of us were working with these kind of soul retrieval kind of tasks.
Well, Carol, I had heard that one possible reason that why we as humans can travel to the spirit world, to where these spirits may be stuck, is because we're closer to the lower vibration level than actually spirits who have moved on and who cannot return back to the place where the lost souls may be staying. So therefore, we're the only ones that can rescue them. Do you believe this to be true?
I don't know if we're the only ones, because possibly after a certain amount of time they become readier to communicate with the higher level spirits. But it does seem that we do provide a very important service because they are much more attuned to our energy vibration, and they can perceive us better, and we can get their attention and help them understand, because a lot of them are very confused. And some of them are actually quite frightened because, religion is taught that they're going to have this final judgment and they might not get a good grade and end up burning forever, and so they kind of are hiding out almost. It's very interesting when there's so many different situations, and people, for example, I've rescued a number that have committed suicide, and we're feeling so extremely guilty and ashamed, and it was really quite sad to work with them. But as you do, and they start feeling just a bit of love energy, their whole vibration changes and they can move on also.
Well, the episode that Monroe Institute was featured on the Bio channel of the Unexplained dealt with just this very thing, helping the souls move forward. And it was called in the show Rescue and Retrieval. So how experienced with out-of-body experience does one have to be to do such a thing?
Actually, not at all, because, well, of course, it depends on how you define out-of-body experience. Monroe told us, and told me personally, that anybody who is in Focus 21 or above is out-of-body, whether they know it or not. But that, some people are much more conscious of being separated from a physical body than others. But the truth is, I had actually gone out of body before I did the Lifeline program, but I didn't really realize it, and I didn't think that I could really do it. I had no idea that I could do it, but the whole idea of being able to help someone on another level was so intriguing to me. It's like, who cares if I go out of body? If I can go help somebody, it's worth it. And so I thought, well, I'll just go try, and I'll try to suspend judgment because, you were talking about all these degrees I've got. I was a lawyer. I had a really analytical mind. And so it was really hard. So I just kind of had to keep convincing myself that, well, you're not doing anything bad. Even if you're making it up, you're not hurting anybody, so it's okay. So just go with it. And after a while, I finally did. and I would always ask for confirmations, as they did in the program there, and I got a lot of them, which really helped me accept all of this too, because at the beginning it is kind of overwhelming to think that this is possible.
Well, you know what, it is so fascinating to me that many of us look to our departed family members or other spirits to help us when things aren't going the way we want them to. And now we have the ability to help them accomplish probably the most important thing in life after life, and that is to cross over. So in your experience, from listening to participants, what is that feeling like after they've left your soul?
After the feeling of the participants after they've helped, or the feeling of this?
Yes.
Well, it's usually of extreme satisfaction and joy. A lot of people think, oh, this is all serious business, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it's almost funny. I remember one time the person that seemed to be attracted to me to be rescued was this guy on a Harley dressed in, black leather and the whole bit, and big beard, and he wasn't really paying any attention to me, but for some reason, I seemed like I was supposed to help this person, and I couldn't kind of really get his attention, and then all of a sudden I look at myself, and I'm dressed up like a real babe in black leather too, and so then he thought it was a pretty cool thing, and then I could talk to him and convince him to come along with me. And other times, it's little children that I remember another time working with a group of children that were, it's like 8 or 10 of them in a village in Africa that had been assassinated, or one of those tribal upheavals that they had a number of years ago, and I couldn't get their attention. They were scared to death. They were all kind of huddled up against the wall, and all of a sudden this little dog appears, and chasing a ball, and that really got their attention, and they were chasing after the dog, and so then I was able to kind of get the dog to come with me, and it's amazing the things that can happen, and the confirmations. And we were so impressed with the Unexplained series ourselves, because it was a total surprise to us at the Institute that they had gone to the genealogist and had actually found historical data on those two people. We were just blown away, because they hadn't told us they were doing that, and we knew that a couple of the retrievals that had been done during the program were much more recent, and because of the family situations, they wouldn't be able to use those on the air. And I was kind of wondering, well, how are they going to make not just one, but 2 half-hour segments if, they can't really show any proof of anything? And when they brought on the genealogist who found the two people, and then, we were just amazed ourselves. It was really, really nice.
Wow. You know what? Has there ever been a case where a soul did not want to move forward?
Yes. Sometimes they really aren't ready, or they're waiting for their wife or their husband or their loved one, and so that's fine too. We're there to help if they need it, but in some cases they really don't need it. They're just waiting, and that's part of what they feel is important for them to do.
That's amazing. I do have one question that did come to me while I was researching, and has there ever been any contact made with what could be called an alien life form while out of body?
Oh, yes. We have other programs. We have one that is specifically to become a galactic ambassador, which is called Starlines. And in this program, the a prerequisite. We've already gone beyond Focus 27 and out of the realm of human consciousness into other realms and learn to communicate with other forms of being. And there have been many, and there have been some things that I was totally astounded one time in a program where this participant comes back with all this kind of mathematical information that he had kind of downloaded from one of these beings, and he didn't have a clue about what it was or anything, but there just happened by coincidence to be in the program another person who understood it and was like, oh my goodness, that's amazing, that's wonderful, and so they copied it down. I don't know what they ever did with it, but it was like scientific information that was way beyond the person who actually received it, but of huge interest to another participant in the program. And he said that it had come from, an alien source. And in the program that we call Starlines, you actually move out to visit first the different planets in our solar system and the beings that might be there, and then beyond the solar system to our local bubble and beyond into other galaxies, and see what kind of communication can come. And it comes in so many different ways, and it's sometimes it's extremely difficult to, shall we say, decipher, because their concepts are so different from ours, and it's really hard. It's kind of like our grandfathers trying to figure out what an iPad is. It's like they wouldn't have a clue, and that's why it's extremely fascinating to do this, but sometimes a bit frustrating because you can't always really get it. We kind of immediately try to translate the information into something that we know here on Earth, and a lot of times it doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, just as in everything that we discuss, we always want to bring forth both sides of the equation. So I do have to ask you, are there any harmful aspects to this program? Is there anything that could potentially be somewhat dangerous or hazardous to the participant?
Well, the first thing on a really basic level, anyone who has a tendency toward any kind of seizures or epilepsy or anything like that should definitely not use this technology, because it can facilitate that. And also anyone who has any serious mental conditions is better off not using. I'm talking about schizophrenia, things like that. Mm-hmm. That as kind of before you get started. And then later, the way the programs are set up are really very step-by-step processes where you slowly get introduced. But one of the things that I found really fascinating is right in the very first exercises of the very first program, you learn not only to move into these states, but to come out immediately if you would wish to do so for any reason. Maybe because there's an emergency in the building, or maybe because you're having an experience that for some reason you don't like. Usually those kind of experiences, and this is what Monroe found himself too, are our own fears coming up. It's like it's not something really outside of us, but it's our own. We have to realize that we're moving into very unknown territory, and so a lot of fears do come up, and it is a very healing process because of that. But, actual danger, I haven't seen any. Mostly it's people get into very, very high-level states, and they would prefer not to come back, but they certainly do.
You actually just touched on something, and one of the many rewards with the Lifeline program is not only to be able to save and rescue a lost soul, but to also find answers to some of the participants' own personal questions about life and the meaning of you. When people finish the Lifeline program and find some personal answers, do you hear similarities in their responses or the knowledge that they had gained while doing the experience, or is every answer different or response different?
Well, there's some really basic things that seem to be similar, and that's that you completely lose your fear of death. It's like you don't think that there's an afterlife, you know it. And that is completely different from reading about it or having, a belief system taught to you. When you actually experience that you can communicate and be aware and actually help someone in a state of consciousness like this, where physical body just doesn't really seem to exist at all, you seem completely separate from it, you really do lose your fear of death. You don't lose your fear of suffering or, being ill or anything like that, but your fear of actually what's on the other side, because the experience is the same as people, almost everyone who comes back from a near-death experience is extremely enlightened, and many of them wanted to stay and were kind of said, no, you got to go back.
Right.
Now, this is the same kind of thing that, except you don't have to nearly die to be able to do it. You really do know for yourself and from your own experiences that there is more.
Now, since this is a radio show about the paranormal, I do have one question. If these lost souls are somewhere, and we didn't get into this too much, but I know many folks can read it up about the Lifeline program and everything that the Monroe Institute has to offer, but if these souls are lost somewhere in Focus 23 or 25 and may or may not know what has happened, are they able to reach out to us here on the earthly plane? And if so, what, and this is sort of what the paranormal investigators are experiencing, are the spirits still in that lower focus level who have not yet moved on to Focus 27. Is this what paranormal investigators are sort of somewhat, experiencing?
Well, yeah. I would. That's the way I understand it, and a lot of times I think, and some of the experiences I have really corroborated that, is that they're trying to get our attention, but we often just don't pay attention. And the ghosts and houses, there's a number of different reasons why they might be there, but they're often very upset that someone else is in their house and what are they doing here and things like that. I was at a movie one time, and they suddenly stopped the movie and had all of us go outside because there was a fire in the marquee of the movie theater, and all of the lights were dripping fire down and the plastic was burning up, and I'm standing out there looking at this saying, wow, this is really strange. And the guy next to me says, no, it's not strange. Everybody knows there's ghosts in that building. And don't you see there's like 2 apartment buildings above it, and they're empty because nobody wants to live there because they know there's ghosts. And so,
right.
So I thought, well, my husband was with me, and he says, that's it. I'll buy the apartments. You get rid of the ghosts, and we'll have a deal. And I said, well, I don't know about that. But so that night, I had come home fairly recently from the Lifeline program, so I thought, well, I'm going to try and see if I can help these ghosts. And so I kind of finally get in touch with them, and they were saying that they were waiting for their daughter to bring their new granddaughter so they could get to know their new granddaughter. And I kind of got the understanding that they had died by this little kerosene heater thing. And so I'm thinking, is this really real? And I said, well, why did you get my attention? They said, well, we knew that you could perceive us, but you weren't paying any attention. And I said, and so you started that fire? And they said, well, we had to do something. And I actually did go back the next day and confirm at the store next to us that, yes, an older couple had died there. And they thought it was from one of these little space heater things, and it had been 40 or 50 years before. And they had actually torn down the old building and built the new theater and everything, but apparently they were still there.
And not happy, probably, that there was something else there.
Well, and I love to tell stories, but I'll just tell you one more. This was in Seville, in Spain, and I was really trying to talk to anybody I could find who knew something about this kind of stuff. And so I had gotten in touch with this monk who was in Seville, and he told me, oh, yes, I can talk to you about that. I know about those kind of things. I was specially trained to come here to Spain, because he was English, to do this kind of work, because I was told that in southern Spain there was a lot of these kind of issues. And so he was telling me this story. He said, yeah, just last week I went to one of my participants' apartments, and she said that she had a ghost there, and so she left me in the apartment, and I did my 2-hour ritual, and I cleared the space. And he said, and you know what happened? He said, if it wouldn't have been me, I never would have believed it. But the phone rang, and since I was the only one there, I answered the phone. And when I did, this voice said, well, you've got me out in the hall now, so now what do I do? and I said to him, so what did you do? And he said, well, I didn't know what to do. And I said, oh, well, maybe I can show you what to do. And so in the end, we went mentally back, and he was still in the hallway, and I kind of walked the monk through the whole idea of helping him move off into the light, because he hadn't been trained that part. It was like a lot of people who do this kind of work don't see these spirits as beings the same as us.
Right.
Some kind of inferior or negative kind of beings, and really that's not the case at all.
Right.
Wow. You know what? There is a TMI program that states it talks about a place of gathering. Can you share with our listeners what this place is, and how can people actually reach it?
Well, the gathering is what we were talking about a few minutes ago. Monroe perceived that there were a number of ships and other kind of interplanetary or vehicles from other dimensions gathered around the Earth, observing the Earth at this time of change. And that they knew that how we worked with the change that's taking place on the planet could actually affect their existence in some way. And, he didn't explain all of this, but they kind of gave him the information that many different factors or variables could come together at, kind of this time in history that could really make a big difference as to the future of the Earth. And so this gathering, which is they're observing, seemed to be not from just one place, but from many places. And they feel that he at least had the feeling that they couldn't really intervene, but could maybe advise or something. But and so this gathering, to connect with the gathering, I mean, in the Monroe system, that would be what we would call focus 3435, and would be moving into, the higher level gamma kind of signals. But I think a lot of this work can be done just going into deep meditative states and working with our intention. It's a lot easier with the help of the technology, but, right now, a lot of us have the feeling that they really do want to communicate and try to help us move in the right direction.
Well, there are so many great programs at the Monroe Institute that further our perception and understanding that it's impossible to learn it all on tonight's show. But the MC Squared program, it teaches us how to use our non-physical energy to do stuff like bend spoons, illuminate bulbs, influence computers and dice. I would love to learn that and head over to Vegas. But
and the teacher that actually teaches that program, he's the expert in PK at the Institute, is Dr. Joseph Gallenberger. He actually does a program in Vegas.
Wow.
Because he says, what better place could you have to get instant feedback as to whether you're really able to control your energy in that kind of environment. I actually went to one of those programs, and, in a casino, the energy is pretty heavy, and on top of that, they're always bringing drinks and cigarettes and all kinds of stuff to get it even worse. And so we would practice in the rooms, listening to exercises and getting into kind of a heart space energy, and then we would go down and go to one of the dice tables, and it was really fun and funny because the guys at the table, the croupiers, they could see that we didn't have a clue about throwing dice or about how the game was really played. I mean, we had the basics, but we were real novices, and we kept winning. And one of them eventually actually came to the Institute to learn himself.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. Well,
in the program at the Institute, the bending the spoons and turning on the light bulbs with your hands and growing the seeds in your hand, it's not really about doing that. It's just about learning how much potential we really have and don't use. It's kind of like proving to yourself that, yes, you really are a powerful being.
Well, just with that in mind, I know you are expanding your sites and your programs every year. Can you tell our listeners what new projects you have coming up for 2013?
Well, I certainly can, because I've got lots of them, and there's so many of them. I don't know if 2013 is going to be long enough, but one of the big ones is getting online programs going so that people that, we do have weekend programs out around the U.S. and around the world in certain places, but for people that can't really get away from family and things, to have an experience where you can do it in your own home, but with a group and with a facilitator is what we want to create. That's one. Another one, we are working with an ex-NFL player, Scott Peters, who really wants to help with traumatic brain injuries. And so he was just here at a Gateway, left this morning, and we have a project getting really organized right now about how to go about helping with the technology, because we know it can really make a difference. We already have been using for many years something called stroke recovery, and so it's not that dissimilar. And then also working with veterans, and we have a little tiny pilot project going on here in Charlottesville, Virginia, at the Homeless Center, and I had a really incredible experience last Monday there. One of the ladies came, was totally flustered and upset because she'd left her wallet on the bus, and was just in a really terrible state. And we finally got her to put the headphones on and listen to an exercise with the little group, and she just transformed right before our eyes. And when the half-hour exercise is over, she was like, "Oh, I feel so good now." I was like, "Wow, that was so neat." And I said, "Well, what happened?" And she said, "I don't know, nothing." And so we want to do some of the practical applications of some of this, because we know how much it really can help people lead better lives, and in the case like of the homeless home, have more tools to deal with some of the complications of living on planet Earth, and get over some of the hurdles in an easier fashion.
Carol, in the beginning you had mentioned, I think it was when Luci had asked you the question about how, or what actually got you interested and actually to become a part of the Monroe Institute. You mentioned you had taken some of the courses, obviously, prior to becoming a member of the Monroe Institute. So my question to you is out of the programs that you had taken there, or I'm assuming continuing taking, which program has been the most meaningful to you, or which one has sort of given you the answers that you may have not been able to get before, but now has sort of come full circle and you've got clarity?
That's a really hard one because, like we've been talking, some of them are so different. But I think the Lifeline program really made a huge difference for me. It was that one was tremendous. But the Gateway, the very first one, I said I wasn't what you call a idyllic student. I was sleeping through all of the exercises, and I was really upset because, I kept saying, I come all this way, and I'm sleeping through all the exercises. I'm not getting anything. And on top of that, there was this ex-nun in my class that would get a Spielberg movie with every exercise she did, and she was telling us all these things, and I was so jealous and aggravated, and they kept telling me, "Don't worry, your brain is getting it." And I was like, "Look, I live in Spain. I don't need for anybody to teach me how to have a siesta. I know how to do that." And but when we actually moved into Focus 21, I had an experience that I can still remember so vividly of just total bliss, exploding into this white light that there was nothing there. Nobody said anything. But I can remember saying to myself, now I understand what eternity means. And it was like, well, now when I say that, it doesn't make any sense. But at that moment, it made perfect sense.
Right.
It was just like a complete blowout. It was like, it was just so amazing. And it probably only lasted, a minute or two, but it didn't seem like that at all. It was absolutely amazing. And then, the different things that you learn. One of the most important things after the Lifeline program, many years later, when we had the issue of the 9/11, and to feel that you could actually, from anywhere in the world, go and help those poor souls that were sitting there at their computers and all of a sudden didn't exist anymore, and that you could actually help them because at first there was such confusion and such really complicated energy, but that you could actually help them, and you could feel lots of other people from all over helping also. It was like these kind of things make you feel so connected to everyone, and it was just amazing. But, each program it touches a different aspect of expanding our consciousness, because the remote viewing program, to me, that was absolutely fabulous. And right now we have an incredible teacher for that, who's Joe McMonigal, who's like the best remote viewer in the world. He was the #1 psychic spy, and he's training the program now, so that should be really exciting. But just, all of them. I mean, the Starlines programs where you're out, traipsing around the universe, that was pretty cool.
It sounds like it. Carol, I did want to ask, now, the Monroe Institute does state it's a nonprofit organization. So can I ask you how it's funded and by whom?
Well, it's actually funded by participants in almost, not 100%, but quite a bit, because we do charge for the programs. We work on a pretty tight budget. We have a very small staff, and mostly very dedicated, so they're willing to work at pretty minimal wages. And we do get donations, not as many as I would like. That's another project that we have for this year, to see if there are donations available to help us, because especially research is, it's not cheap to do. And then we support a lot of other kind of services too. But we do have a lot of volunteers who help, not so much in the offices at the Institute, but that we have what we call local chapters, that are groups of people out all over the U.S. and of some around the world that on more or less a monthly basis actually have little get-togethers where they listen to an exercise and just talk about these kind of things with friends, and that's all, basically free, and they give their time and sometimes their homes, or they, go to the library to meet or something. And so we get help in many different ways.
Wonderful. Carol, where can our listeners go to learn more about the Monroe Institute and maybe get a few of the CDs and DVDs that are offered?
Oh, the best place is our website, which is monroeinstitute.org. And there's actually, if you go, we have the store there, and we also have resources in one of the tabs up at the top. And under resources, there are a downloadable library. There's a couple of free exercises that people can download and listen to. There's an incredibly beautiful one that we have up there kind of as a public service for healing. And it has very special tones to help people support healing efforts and get their body's own healing mechanisms going. And there's some for improving your sports. And there's like an introduction to how the sound works and things. But there's one that's improving your golf game, and it's using, the visualization with the HemiSync technology under it to visualize perfect golf swing. Well, the president of Sony in Japan took 11 points off of his golf score, and so he got really impressed, and they sold like 20,000 of them in one day or something.
Wow.
But, just getting started, and then in the bookstore on the website, where there's all kinds of possibilities to help people with meditation and, relaxation and moving into deeper states and working with past lives, all kinds of things. It's almost overwhelming, the store, because there's like 350 different CDs.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, you know what? It has been a real pleasure to speak with you tonight, Carol. I want to remind everybody to please visit the MonroeInstitute.org and make a date to visit the beautiful Roberts Mountain Retreat at the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. Truly a beautiful countryside. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show, and hopefully we can have you back later on in the year to get an update on the programs in the Institute.
Absolutely. I'd love to, and we can find some other exciting topics to talk about.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Carol. Have a wonderful weekend now.
Thank you, and thank you to all your listeners, too. And if you ever have any questions, I'm Carol at MonroeInstitute.org.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol.
So much.
Thank you.
Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. You taking a breather?
I feel like I've been there. That was absolutely, I'm smiling. I mean, the feeling right now of just even thinking about the things that they look at and the things that they're exploring is just so wonderful.
You know, it's unfortunate that the actual episode that the Monroe Institute was a part of on the biochannels, The Unexplained, is nowhere to be found. We can't find it on YouTube. We tried to look, and I know Luci was trying desperately to look for it, but we could not find it anywhere. I'm not sure if they've archived it and then have taken it off their archive, because it was only, I think it was, September of last year. So it wasn't too long ago, maybe six months ago, not even. But I can tell you this, when I first saw that episode, and I had just caught it by flipping the channel, and what had caught my eye obviously was, and at that time it was new, the show on The Unexplained, and I just was enthralled with it. And I hate to always over-exaggerate and you know, constantly rev up something, but I mean, I usually watch a lot of these types of shows. I watch the History Channel, the Science Channel. I love all of that stuff. I love learning. I'm kind of a nut, you know. It's either a reality show or it's some educational thing that I watch. But because I love learning reality television, I love learning about people. And then, you know, all these other channels. But the Bio Channel is so great, and they have such great programming that this episode in particular about the Monroe Institute was just amazing, and you got to see actually how they and the episode itself, I think it was maybe about 20 people that was in this group, and it was a sort of documentary type thing, and they filmed them in the process of prior to going into Lifeline, into the method and the procedure of how to do that, and I think they all went into sort of separate rooms, and I think they had headphones on. And what Carol was talking about, they were listening to the hemisync, those binaural beats in these headphones, and they would sort of go off into what they would call focus 22, 23, 24, 25, and meet and visit these spirits on the other side, and then come back, and then they would all group together again and then just exchange their stories. And Carol had mentioned this before, that there was two individuals that talked about certain people, and they actually came back to the group with names. And there were descriptions and storylines of this deceased person that they had met in this focus level. And there were researchers that had gone in to do some research on those names and do some background history and found a lot of the stories to be true that was not public, so that these people would not be able to get this information prior to. These were, and I think in both of those circumstances, they were closed records that only sort of higher level authorities could actually get this information. And they were able to come back and sort of corroborate their stories. And I just thought it was amazing to be able to show that. And I've never seen a program like that before, that you can actually go to the other side and help a spirit. I just thought it was amazing.
Well, you know what, the thing that kind of struck me about this whole conversation was when, you know, you asked the question about paranormal investigating. And, of course, through my mind flashed, you know, all of the investigations we've we've been on, and the connections and reactions that we've made. And two in particular came to light. One was Eastern State Penitentiary and Death Row. Remember when we had the spirit box going, and the voice that was coming through was asking for help. He kept asking for help over and over. And then again, the other place that came to mind was Valeska. That the family is there, and why would they remain? Because they're waiting for each other. And it's starting to make a lot more sense. I mean, as we go along. Another thing that she talked about when she mentioned about 9/11, you know how I reacted when I got near the site. And now it's clicking. It's clicking. There are still so many souls there that are looking for someone to listen to them, to react to it. And I felt them. I felt them, and it was just too overwhelming for me. But something like this, becoming aware of what our purpose is maybe, or what we can do, helps to understand what it is. And maybe it becomes easier as we learn more. I don't know. I'm rambling, but it's just the short conversation that we had with her has made a lot of things clear.
Well, I think it's opened our eyes. I mean, it certainly has for me. Doing the research and watching some of the YouTube videos that I've seen of Carol, and going into the website and actually seeing the show on the Unexplained, it's opened my eyes to the possibility of, and this may be hard to explain, and I think Carol actually touched on it a little bit, that it's sort of all intertwined. And we've had a couple of guests on prior to that. Paranormal investigating is not so much separate from the study of aliens, the act of remote viewing, all of these parapsychology topics and discussion points are really separate in the way of how they're discussed and how they're explained. But I think things will start to come together once we start to be able to weave the web in between them all and connect the dots in between them. I think that's the only time when we're going to get sort of that big aha moment in the paranormal community. I think a lot of this is connected in some sort of way, but it may be difficult for us here in this conscious level, here on this earth, to understand it. We may, and I've said this so many times, we may have to actually go to the other side. Once we pass ourselves, that may be when we get the aha moment. But I think these programs at the Monroe Institute gives you more of an insight, because it allows you to get to that level that we're capable of, and tapping into our inner soul or our inner being to be able to drift off into either other dimensions, or if you want to call them the focus levels, as Monroe Institute does. It could give you a sort of an insight to it, but I don't think we're going to totally get the complete package yet. You know me, I'm always skeptical. I'm always skeptical, not in the fact that I don't believe it, but I think it's just I'm skeptical about getting the answers, the true answers. And even if we do, how is it to be ever proven? And I've always said this, that it's the only way it's proven is by the individual's experience. You can't prove it to anyone else. You yourself have to actually experience the moment and be able to feel what goes on during that time.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the really, really wonderful things about the Monroe Institute is that, like you said, maybe we won't get the answers until we go to the other side, but I think they're touching on the gateway that we don't have to go to the other side to see what's there or to find out what's there. I think we have the capability within ourselves to actually do it now. And I think what we have to do is learn to become aware and learn to expand our boundaries more than what we've been placed in, more than what we've been taught, more than what we realize. We need to open up and just to go, to let ourselves go. The line from Star Trek comes out, to go where man has
never gone before.
Yeah, that's what's coming into my head. And I think, of course, the mass majority of people, it's going to take a while for everybody to understand and believe. But I think the sprouts are starting. I think it's kind of like you're seeing the sprouts of the plants. They're growing all over the place. And hopefully as we go along, it'll become this big, beautiful field of flowers. But right now it's just like a little flower here and a little flower there. But as we go along and as we open up our minds to it and keep open minds, I think the best thing is to keep an open mind and not to, you can be skeptical, but maybe not so close-minded about it. I don't know how else to put it.
Well, you mentioned expanding our boundaries, and what I want to introduce to everyone, with your permission, Luci, is a new segment or a new part of the show that we're going to introduce tonight. And what we thought, because we get tons and tons of emails from our listeners, our fans, people who may just listen once and may leave comments. We do get a lot of emails from people, and so we thought it would be best if we could share some of them, because some of them are pretty amazing. Some of them are just comments about, what we should do better, or that, they just like our show, whatever it may be. But some folks actually write us and ask us questions, and some of the emails actually prompt us to think a little bit harder and actually create a show around. And so tonight we're going to start with this little part of the show and read some fan emails and maybe get a discussion on that. And hopefully, if we see some chatter going on in the chat room, maybe we can then bring forth another show on someone's email. So we do encourage everybody, if you'd like, please email us. We take everything that you guys read, that you send us, and we read them, and we try to respond back as quickly as we can. But if you'd like, send us an email at paranormalreviewradio@yahoo.com and drop us a line. Tell us, hey, hi, how are you? If there's a topic that you want to discuss, if there's a expert that you want to have on, or anything like that, shoot us our way. So, Luci, I wanted to read one that I caught last week.
Okay.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone, here is an email that we got from a Brenda G. And she writes, Dear Paranormal Review Radio, I just started listening to your show, and it's pretty good. I don't normally listen to paranormal radio shows, but saw your Facebook page and thought I would tune in. I actually have a question. I have done a lot of research on quantum mechanics and the theory that we are all one. The universe, the things around us, our bodies, and our souls. We all come from one element, and therefore we are all affected by what everyone does in their own lives. Have you ever done a show on this, or is this something you can discuss? I would be more than happy to come on your show to talk about it. Sincerely, Brenda G. Now, when I saw this email and I read the word quantum mechanics, my mind just went blank. I've never been a science major. Physics and any of that stuff sort of went over my head when I was in school. But this email prompted me to do some research online, and I read quite a few things on quantum mechanics and the whole idea and the theory on that we are all one. And I shared this with Luci, when was it, yesterday or the day before?
Last night, yeah.
Last night, okay.
Uh-huh.
And I showed Luci some YouTube videos that I had found that, I mean, when I say blew me away completely, that I never really knew existed. And this may not be news to other people, but the whole idea on quantum mechanics and quantum physics and the theory that we are all one and how it relates to sort of the paranormal aspect of things is that, and this is what I've learned, and I may get this wrong, and I'm going to try and speak a little bit slower so that I get it right, that scientists have proven that electrons that are spinning around an atom if you affect one of them, if you heat it up, if you tap it, if you do whatever to this one electron, the other electron will feel it and make an adjustment or adjust itself because of the action that you've done to one. And they say, the scientists say, that even if these electrons are either, very close together or miles and light years away from each other, the actions will still happen. And the idea that we are all one is because from the Big Bang is what scientists are saying right now, that the universe and everything around it, including you and the computer that you're looking at right now, all came from the Big Bang. And the Big Bang was sort of like, I think some of them have equated it to the size of a pea, and expanded out. Now, before it expanded out, it was one element. After the Big Bang, the universe and everything around it expanded out. But each particle of the universe and everything around it still is connected because everything is pretty much made up of matter, and matter has atoms and electrons. And these electrons are still sort of in communication with each other. And the idea of this quantum mechanics theory, and I think it's called quantum entanglement, that we're all connected. And I mentioned this before, sort of that spiderweb weave, that we're all sort of connected in a way because what one person does affects another person. And I saw the YouTube videos on this, and I'm probably going to put some links on our Facebook page just to share with everybody, because I may not be explaining it completely true. And Luci, feel free to chime in if I've missed anything right now.
Well, remember when we were talking about this, I did mention that I kind of have always been aware of it because Native American beliefs, they do touch on this. There's a connection to everything that is made up of the energy that is, and it all stems from that original energy. So I think what I got from some of those videos is that what we perceive around us is one thing. It's our own perception of it. But in reality, there is a connection. There is a connection between the inanimate objects and living things. There's a connection between the earth and people. There's a connection between space and the stars that are out there. It is, there's all one. But because of what we have been taught and what we've learned, we've lost that reality. We've got our own internal perception of what things are.
Right, and I think the scientists that I had watched and heard call it the classical mechanic or the classical world as opposed to the quantum world. And in the classical world, it's our perceived reality. And in the quantum world, basically there is no time, there is no space, all is one. And we have created this classical reality for us. We've created this classical world within our own mind and getting sort of, again, maybe intertwining it into the topic tonight, in our own conscious level and in our consciousness, we create, as you are conscious, we create what we are perceiving. So basically we're perceiving the computer that's in front of us right now, the conversations that we're having right now. We actually are making that happen. It is not just happening on its own. We are, in our minds, collectively and individually, making this happen. These conversations that right now we're seeing flip up through the chat room is a collective, collective effort amongst all of our consciousness to make that happen, and which is not the reality. The reality is the quantum world within quantum mechanics. I'm getting so crazy right now, my head is going to explode. That the quote-unquote reality is the quantum world, and that is where we are all one, and that is where reality is. It's sort of like the whole movie about the Matrix. I mean, they've touched on it, and I've watched the first one, and I promised myself I would never watch it again because I think I had a migraine headache after watching that movie. But it is that same idea that we've created this sort of illusion here, but in reality, we're actually living another life in the quantum world.
Uh-huh.
And because of that, we're connected. We create this classical world so that our conscious has some stability, but in reality, we're actually on multiple dimensions and multiple universes. I mean, all I have to say about this right now is, Luci, I want to do a show on this, and you have to find us.
Yes.
You have to find us somebody who is intelligent enough to explain it better than me on quantum mechanics and this whole idea, because I think, again, it's another area that we can sort of share with everybody to help, again, intertwine and create that web within all of the paranormal topics that we all know today, which could possibly open some eyes for folks to either further it or understand what they're doing right now.
I am smiling so much right now. I mean, first off, welcome to the Matrix. Second off, I think there's a lot of us that do have an understanding of it, and like I said last night, not with so much the big words, but I think it's there, and I think it's something that would be really, really interesting to address. And I think doing a show on this would be amazing, and I will find somebody that can talk about this. I mean, because just some of the things that were put forward in these videos, I mean, they can, like you mentioned, they can touch on so many things: paranormal investigating, time, so many things. I mean, oh my God, it's just like this big giant. It's like someone gave me this giant library, and they've just let me loose. I can read anything I want. I can look up anything I want. I can watch anything I want. This is so, like, mind-boggling. It's wonderful. I mean, it's really amazing. Yes, there's to do a show on this.
Yeah, there's a series of videos on YouTube and all over on the web. I think it was part of a documentary, and I shared it with you last night, Luci. And it's by Dr. Quantum, and it's a cartoon that pretty much tries to explain quantum physics and quantum mechanics on a layman's term, and to be able to better understand it on this end, quantum physics, so for those who are not completely into that field. And they're really great videos. And so I really recommend everybody going to YouTube and just type in Dr. Quantum, and you'll see a bunch of videos there. And one of them in particular, I think it was called Dr. Quantum, and it was Flatlands. And this is the video that I had shared with you, and I'll just be brief on this, and then we can get on to the next one. But Flatlands was about the explanation of a two-dimensional world and the difference between a two-dimensional world and a three-dimensional world, which is what we live in. And watching this video, it's sort of, again, I hate to use the same phrase all the time, but opened my eyes to the idea of, okay, if that's how it's explained with 2D and 3D, it could sort of correlate to the same way that you would try and figure out what 3D is to 4D or 3D is to 5D, and, 6th dimension, 7th dimension, 8th dimension, and all of that, because the basis is the same. And the video really sort of gave the opportunity for people to understand how a spirit in another dimension views our 3D world and how they look upon us in the 3D world and what they see and what they know. And they even said it in that video that the only way to really know it is to come to that other dimension. So it was pretty fascinating to watch that video and to, I guess, again, correlate it to everything else. And so I really do want to do another show or a show on this. And I really want to thank Brenda G. for writing us that email, because that one was a big one. We've read thousands of emails, not thousands, hundreds of emails. And this one was a pretty interesting one.
Mhm. Okay. No, it is something we need to touch on. We really do. Okay, can I read another one that we've got?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This one is from Eric Samuels, and this one is, "Hi, Luci and Anthony. Sometimes you guys just talk about a topic a little too much and sometimes say the same thing over and over. Try to stick to the topic and bring new discussions and not say the same thing over and over. It may help the show." From Eric Samuels.
Yes. I admit it. I do. I mean, if you don't mind me I'm just going to say a couple of sentences for this. I agree with Eric. What was his last name?
Samuels.
Eric Samuels. I 100% agree with him because we do. I mean, this is radio. There are certain times when a show is projected in a way prior to it actually starting is, sort of the way that we want it to go. And it certainly happens when we have a guest. And sometimes our guests either speak too little or too long, and so Luci and I are constantly readjusting things during an interview so that we make sure that we're sticking to the time constraints that we have, because it's a 2-hour show. So when sometimes that there's a guest on and they may end too short, we've got to now fill the gap. And whereas we never really thought that we would have to. And so a lot of times we will just regurgitate and keep talking about something or bring up the same thing or mention the same words over and over again. I admit it. I apologize. That's something that we're going to work on. But, it's hard to do that sometimes at the moment. And when you don't have another topic to discuss, we try and lengthen the actual topic or the discussion that we have at that moment a little bit longer than we probably should.
Well, let me respond from the ADD kid herself.
Go ahead.
I do apologize. I really do apologize. And I know a lot of times I have the tendency when I get excited about something that I just go a mile a minute. And I probably do repeat a lot of things. I am working really hard on making that better. And, of course, I probably have the best coach in the world because Anthony lets me know when I've gone off the path. But I am working very hard to improve this. And I want to thank Eric for bringing that to our attention. I mean, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll sit after a show and we'll, talk about, okay, how do you think it went? We'll review what we did. And sometimes it's better to have a fresh set of eyes look at it too. So Thank you so much, Eric, for your observation. We hear you loud and clear, and we will work very hard not to repeat and to say the same thing over and over.
Good. And you know what? I'm glad you read that email. We're not here to always read good emails. We we do get emails like this. Some are even nastier than that. But we will try and read them on air. I mean, we're not ashamed. This is a forum for everyone, and we're not perfect. We've never said that we were experts on the radio or within the paranormal world because, frankly, I don't think there are experts in the paranormal field. And so, we're all in it together, and we're just normal people trying to get the word out and have a discussion on the paranormal. So,
well, I just like to think of it as a conversation between us and the listeners. I mean, it's not us sitting up here on a soapbox. I mean, we're just as curious as everybody out there. We're students just like you are, and like you said, Anthony, we're not experts. We're still learning. Every show we do, I honestly take something away from it. I really do.
Okay. All right. Do you have another one?
Yes, I do. This one was actually posted on our Facebook page, and I just want to...
Oh, yes, we talked about this one.
Yes. I just want to say something before I read it. It is amazing how some people have illusions, at least to me, okay? Or they may be slightly disillusioned. I guess this is what I want to say. But anyway, this one is from, I hope I'm saying this name right. His name is Lee Eigelhart. And
I think it's a woman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is for Wednesday, January 16th. And
this one is on our Facebook page. So, folks, if you want to go on our Facebook page at Paranormal Review Radio, you can actually check it out. This woman posted this on our page. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. If you like the paranormal, you will love my book on Kindle. It is called A True Story, Living with Minions. My first book, A True Story, Living with Minions, is the actual accounts of my life, containing multiple paranormal experiences, which include 2 demonic infestations. The book is completely designed by Lee Ann Eigelhart. Including the illustrations and book cover. I have made simple mistakes, which has unintentionally invited the paranormal into my life. I point out my mistakes with the hopes that others will learn from them. My next book will contain my education on these experiences. I may become a demonologist.
Oh. Go ahead, Lucy. You start first, and I'll go second.
Okay. If you've listened to our show, you kind of already have an idea of what Anthony and I both think about demonologists and the like. And personally, I have always felt that to deal with a demon, if there is such a thing in your world, in your circle, in wherever you are, requires an intense amount of study. I think it really needs to be done by a member of the clergy. I don't think it's something to be taken lightly, and I think it could be very possibly dangerous for someone to just simply say, okay, I've written a book, and now I'm a demonologist. We've had Bishop Long on the show, and Bishop Long has discussed this with us, and I do want to say that I really, really admire the bishop. I agree with a lot of what he says. I think that demons, if they are around, and Bishop Long has mentioned, and I've heard other people mention in the clergy, that an actual encounter with a demon is rather rare. I think just from watching the Dead Files, if you follow Amy and Steve, Amy has mentioned as a medium, a lot of times there are things on the other side that portray themselves to be something that they're not. So in order to say something is a demon, I don't think the average person is qualified to identify whether or not something is a demon or not. I think if something truly is demonic, I really think it's serious business, and it's not to be taken lightly, and I think that there always should be clergy involved. And that's just my personal...
It just amazes me. You know, the post that she wrote was that she has a book. Obviously, she's trying to promote her book. And she posted it on our page to hopefully get people to notice it and go check it out, which is fine. People do that all the time on our Facebook page, and, you know, we don't mind it. We'd love to, you know, for people to sort of ask permission first, because we don't do that. We don't push on people unless we know that they will allow us to post on their pages. So we'd sort of like that same respect. But anyway, that's not the reason that we brought this up. The reason is because she wrote a book about her life experience and dealing with what she calls minions, or 2 demonic infestations that she had in her home, and I guess living through it, writing this book. And the last line that she wrote in this post was, "I may become a demonologist." It is laughable to me, and it really is disheartening to me that people in this community, in the paranormal world, consider that to be something that they're striving to do. You know, I read books all the time lately. I haven't done it prior to a few years back, but I'm starting to read a lot more now. And, I read all sorts of stuff. And, you know, in school and in college, I had read different books. I read psychology books. I even read some medical books. I don't consider myself to be a psychologist. I don't consider myself to be any of those things. Just because I've either lived through it or have written a book about it, I don't think it makes you the expert on it. I don't think you would become, this professor in whatever it is that you're thinking of. And for this woman, I feel sad for her that she has that mentality that because she's lived through it, now she just may become a demonologist. It really is something, first of all, that many people should not get into. I understand the study of demonology and learning about it and, keeping up to date with current news and information and maybe technology in regards to it, if there is such a thing. But I'm hoping that when she says demonologist, she says that she is in it to learn about it and not to be the person who goes into a home to then claim to be able to get rid of these quote-unquote demonic spirits, because there is a whole slew of things that you need to know when you quote-unquote become a demonologist. It's not just walking to a room and saying, okay, you've got a demon and this is how we're going to treat it. There's a whole slew of procedures and protocols that you need to do, and most of it has to deal with the individual who is claiming that either they or their home has a demonic infestation or possession. You really have to go through the medical field first in order to assess that person and assess their mental abilities before ever talking about what you or what it is, if it is demonic or not, what you can do or what is happening in regards to something being possibly demonic. I just really hope that this person takes heed, and I hope they're listening, and I hope they do listen to this, and take heed in that notion and really think about the idea of getting into demonology before they actually do. It is not, and it seems as though it's being hyped up all over within media and movies and everything else. And Jason Haxton, who we had on prior, I think it was around October, that he had talked about this very thing, that because of the movies that are coming out, like the Dybbuk box. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was actually Noah Tysick that was talking about that after that interview, and the whole idea of the Dybbuk box and all of these possession movies and everything, that it's sort of glamorizing the whole idea of demons and the devil and demonology and the aspects of that. It's sort of glamorizing it, and I get it. I like that they're putting that media and movies and print and all of that stuff out there for people to understand it and know it and see it and watch it and hear it and read it. But it should not be that way where people then become or have the idea that, oh, okay, I can actually become a demonologist now. Let me read a little bit more, and then let me get my cross and my Bible and wear some funky clothing and now go to homes. I just think people need to sit down, and really think about this before they get into it.
Well,
okay, I'm off my soapbox now, Lucy.
No, that's fine. But I think what we're trying to say, too, is that it's fine. If you're going to write a book about your experiences, that's wonderful. That's awesome. Share your experiences.
Right.
Your story may have some similarities with someone else, and someone else may take something from that. But I think the bottom line is that, okay, just because I had appendicitis and I lived through it, I had my appendix taken out, and then I read everything I could about appendicitis to understand it. So now I'm going to be a doctor. It's kind of like that same thinking. First off, I think the most important thing to think about is that, okay, I've seen a demon. Well, are you really sure? I mean, again, it is very, very rare that a demon makes itself known. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of things out there. I know a lot of people sometimes try to sensationalize and, oh, there was something here, and I saw the glowing red eyes, and I know it's a demon. But then again, too, before you go to someone else and you say, okay, I've dealt with this because I've been around demons and I can help you, before you can possibly harm someone else by giving them the wrong information or possibly making a situation worse. I think that's the important part. You have to be very, very, very careful when dealing with things like this. And just to say, I've gotten experience, I've dealt with this, and now I'm going to be a demonologist. And I know we've kind of had this conversation once before on one of our open mic nights when we had a so-called demonologist call us, and it just amazes me, like you, Anthony, that people all of a sudden decide, okay, I'm going to be a demonologist. I can do this. I've read everything I can. Well, this is not something. It's not like learning to become a plumber. And even becoming a plumber, you have to be an apprentice. You have to actually go in there and work with it before you can call yourself a plumber. Well, before you call yourself a demonologist, there's a lot involved. And it's not just grabbing that book and grabbing, like you said, all the trappings of it. Demons are evil. Well, and evil is combated by faith. And I think faith and clergy are probably the answer for this. I don't think that the average person can just learn to do this out of a book. And I think there's a real danger there that people can make their own situations worse or possibly have someone go into a situation where they can be harmed.
I agree. It's a topic that we've had many discussions on, and who knows, you know what, maybe we should bring this up again. Maybe we should bring it to light, because I don't think we've actually done a show on demonology itself. It's been intertwined here and there with certain guests that we've had on and certain different topics that have been brought up spontaneously, but we've never done a show on demonology, and so maybe we should start to do that.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. I mean, I think the only way to get discussions going is to bring the topic up, and if it helps someone, then we've done our job.
All right, so you want to get on to the next part of the show?
Sure, and that would be the the Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week. Said it slow this time, so I said it correctly.
Okay.
This week, our Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week is from Wheeling, Illinois, and it is Amanda Zewick. She's a full-time mommy and wife. She likes Enigma, Enya, fan of Doreen Virtue, The Walking Dead, The Bears, and she likes Paranormal Review Radio. Amanda is wonderful. I actually met her on a paranormal investigation the first time I went to Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. She is a wonderful person and a really great fan. So thank you, Amanda, for all of your support. Congratulations.
Great. Congrats, Amanda. Thanks for listening.
Okie dokie. This whole conversation tonight has been so amazing. Becoming aware entails many things. As we move forward in this new age, we're going to be learning so much. Now, the Monroe Institute has already begun this process of helping people to find what they're capable of. Robert Monroe had an amazing vision, and it has become a wonderful journey for everyone. We want to thank Carol de la Herran for joining us and introducing the Monroe Institute to us. So, now as we discover the good that we as human beings can do, what about the other side of the coin? What about the bad? Can one work with the forces of the universe to bring negative on each other? Can we literally curse another person? The BioChannel show Cursed looks at this very thing. The host of this interesting and sometimes frightening show is Dr. David Marsh. He will be joining us next week to talk about some of the cases featured on the show. Cases where curses have tormented and even killed the intended victims. Dr. Marsh has studied curses for the past 30 years, and he has some pretty scary stories to share with us. So make sure you're here to see what curses are all about. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You guys are the absolute best. Anthony, thank you for everything you do. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you. So, until next week, dear peeps, have a wonderful and paranormal week. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Paranormal Review